Hi, this is Kurt Johnson doing another Mindful Monday here at Shawbucks, Jamestown, New York on Chautauqua Lake. You can't be happy all week. If you don't start on Monday, should you choose to be happy, life is choice. I had a conversation that we filmed a couple weeks ago with my friend Dr. Ken Erickson, who's a chiropractor but also has a PhD in health science and philosophy. And we've been having this conversation for quite a while, but he wanted to help me and bring clarity into what I was saying with Mindful Mondays with respect to love and fear creating movement and these details. So that's coming up. Today I'd like to talk about how do we not succumb to the bondage of fear in times of crisis. And we're all facing crisis. We're all not back to work yet. We're, changing our businesses. At Shawbucks, the first week of only doing takeout, our sales were down 80%. That number's improved. I don't know. I think last week we might have been around 60% off of what we did a year ago. But still, we can't survive that way. And so when we come out of this, bars, restaurants, this type of business, we're based on public assembly and close public assembly. If you're having a band, entertaining, people want to socialize, they want to hug, they want to feel good and be around friends. That's our motto, relax and unwind with friends. How can you do that with social distancing? Well, you can't. What can we do to change that, to not feel like a victim? And it's something you're not really hearing a lot about. And the reason I do these Mindful Mondays is really to build your immune system. If you really think about it, if you're not in the state of stress and what you're visualizing is going on and you're having fear, your body automatically matches the chemistry to your fears. Whatever fear you're picturing in your mind, your mind's making the chemistry to match that. And if you're living in that state 24/7, it's going to have ill health effects on you. The fears attached to this coronavirus are probably just as disruptive as maybe even more so than the virus itself, because your body's putting out these polluting chemicals of fight or flight, and they're taking all the repair state away from your body. When you're in the state of love, you're in the state of repair. Bruce Lipton, who wrote the book Biology of Belief, he's a stem cell biologist out of the 60s, also wrote a book called The Honeymoon Effect. And in that book, he talked about, when you fall in love, you're in good health, you're in the present moment, and how great life is. And that's what the heart-centering point of understanding that fear and love create movement is kind of trying to keep your base in your heart and not being taken off your heart center. What do I mean by heart center? That's love. That's your compassion, kindness, and all those things that keep you calm and out of the state of stress. And anything outside of that, your fears and that, if you hold on to them and you're thinking negative thoughts and you're watching negative news, it impacts your life. I've heard that there's been studies that once you verbalize a thought, it becomes 10,000 times more potent. And that if you verbalize a negative thought or a negative thought, speaking negative thoughts is 4 to 7 times more potent than a positive thought. So think about that. That's 40 to 70,000 times worse just by verbalizing what you're thinking negatively. And my motto that everything's been said before, and we're really just a bunch of repeaters in our knowledge. So say you're watching CNN or CSNBC, NBC, whatever news outlet you're watching in mainstream media, and you're hearing the sarcasm, the hatred, and all these things going on, and now you're repeating them, and now you're verbalizing this negativity, it's just going to compound and create more chaos and discomfort within yourself. But also you get some kind of release because you become addicted to those negative energies of hatred, of fighting back, of being sarcastic. And it's really detrimental to your health and those you are talking with who are joining you. So my recommendation is if you're going to think negatively, try not to verbalize it. because it's so much more compounded. In these times, so many times words and owning a bar, so many times there's a lot of disruption and people come into arguments. And that's mainly because they're taken off their heart center, or they start to feel like a victim, which means some outside influence has taken you off your center. What I mean by that is most of the fights or arguments, not fights, that I see is someone feels disrespected. And I always say, you can't feel disrespected without your consent. And it's not what happens to you, it's how you respond. And if you allow that to let yourself be a victim, now you're in a negative energy. Now you've given your power away to some other outside influence. And I see that happening, in the media and all these other places. People are afraid, they don't know what to do. And in this time, there's an opportunity to understand how fear and love create movement, and how that if you forgive the fear in others that wanted you to feel disrespected so they could feel better about themselves, if you forgive that fear within them, it doesn't attach to your ego. And you can do that to yourself. Sometimes you broadcast fears to other people because you want them to behave a certain way. And that's not always positive. So in the interview I did with Dr. Erickson, I did make the point that, forgive the fear, forgive me of my fears as I forgive those who have feared against you. It's just a common way that I think that we've gotten off base with religions and understanding. And, you hear all these things about judge not lest you be judged, but yet we're in constant judgment all the time. And it has an ill effect on our body's physiology, our ability to stay in homeostasis so that we can protect ourselves against viruses. In this topic, I've said this before, and I think it might be relevant now because we just passed Easter, and words mean so much. And in our interview, Ken in our first conversations, when Ken would use the word doubt, he wanted to teach me how to doubt. And for me, that reminded me of my childhood, where my dad would doubt, he'd cross his arms, and no, I made up my mind, I doubt it's possible. Where my mind, I question everything, but all things are always possible. I didn't doubt, and I was afraid of self-doubt. And Ken actually had the same meaning, but when he got his PhD, it was from Lancaster, England, and that's an Old English word that means to question. It doesn't have the same meaning I took it as, but it did create some conflict in our early relationships when we were trying to discuss things. So if you really look at what I'm trying to say with fear, I honestly don't think you can have sin without fear, because the definition of sin in Old English means missing the mark. I'm using that not as a religious term, but as an understanding of what gets us in trouble. So when you're missing the mark, I'm speaking of love, your center. You're taking off your center, you miss the mark of love. And that's simply the definition of what sin is. So not that I'm going religious, I was raised Lutheran. If you choose that, that's great, or whatever religion. But most religions do talk about love being the all in all, and that God is love and love is God. So simply, even in the Lord's Prayer where it says a trespass, could you trespass without fear? Could you steal? You're stealing out of lack limitation, which is fear that there's not enough to go around. So that takes you off your heart center. To remain balanced, you actually need to consume fear and allow it to be, and allow yourself to realign with your center. A lot of people will question, well, what about original sin? Well, if you really look at it, original sin is just separation from your heart center. The Adam and Eve story, when they ate of the fruit of knowledge, the first thing they experienced was they realized each other was naked, separate from each other, and they became embarrassed, literally embarrassed. And you can't be embarrassed without being afraid of what other people think or that you're different. So truly, the meaning of original sin is this separation of love from fear. It's just a word. Sin is just a word with blood, with crucifixions and all that. we feared so much that we had to take action and hang a guy on a cross, the Savior, and forgive them of their fears, for they don't know what they do. It's that simple. So metaphorically, going back to Adam and Eve, the first thing they experienced was embarrassment. And metaphorically, what did they do? They clothed themselves in leaves of fear, metaphorically. And living a life being clothed with leaves of fear, you really don't get life's full experiences. You're kind of held back, and we've all experienced that. Being clothed in leaves of fear is like trying to have sex with your clothes on. You can get really close, but you never get the full experience. And pardon me for that, but I mean, honestly, that gives you an example of what it is to experience life. And your fears keep you away from staying in your heart center, but they can also be used to realign yourself with your heart center. It's here to guide you. It's not here to destroy you or destruct you. It has a purpose besides being bondaged in fear. And I didn't say this exactly in my interview with Dr. Erickson. I'm saying it now because of Easter, and it just came out as I was talking. So when you listen to this interview, it's all about staying in your heart center, and that there's a tripod effect between what you consume in your diet of food, thought, and environment, and that outside influences shouldn't take you off your center. As long as you keep hitting the mark, and as long as when you miss the mark and things take you away through what I call the 3Ds, discomfort, disorder, disharmony, and eventually it's disease, and so maybe it's the 4Ds. That's your separation, but it can be that those feelings that you get from your different fears, whether it's shame, guilt, hatred, those are all side effects of fear, or different levels of emotional frequency of fear that are causing you, and you're feeling that as you move away from your heart center. I hope I made that clear enough today, and I know that the interview that Dr. Erickson and I had, he really went into detail, and I just wish you all the best in these times of crisis. There's all kinds of opportunity. Get to know yourself. Pay attention to how fear and love's creating movement in the news, the media. Try not to verbalize your negative thoughts, even if you're having them. Share them in a way that you just don't get more of the same. You know, the more I hate, the more I get the same. The more I get sarcastic, the more I get the same. These energies are outgoing and they're returning to you. So verbalizing, be cautious of what you're verbalizing. Try to stay positive. I know it's not easy. I just want to give all my best to you guys. And for the quote of the week, this quote came to me over 25 years ago when I was spending the night at Roswell Park getting my chemo week-long treatment when I had cancer. And the quote goes, you can spend your time, you can spend your money. Once you spend your time, you can't buy it back with money. So spend your time wisely. Life is choice. Thank you guys. Have a great week. I love you.